Hi, I'm Thalassa, and my sister gave me an STD, then told our parents I probably gave it to her. She smiled while saying it, like it was a joke, a detail in her script. They believed her. They always did. What they didn't know was that I'd been recording everything. And what started as a whisper turned into a storm that exposed more than just a diagnosis. It tore open years of silence, lies, and secrets dressed up as love. But how do you survive a family that punishes you for telling the truth? I've always been the kind of woman who kept her world small and quiet. Mornings were my sanctuary, slices of silence before Valora's voice filled the walls with scripted charm and filtered light. That morning, the air in the house felt thinner than usual. Not wrong, just not right either. I stood barefoot in the kitchen, waiting for the coffee to finish brewing. The fridge hummed. The sun tried to push through the slats of the blinds but didn't quite make it. I stirred oatmeal slowly, quietly. Valora's filming light clicked on in the living room. I didn't even look up. 2 days earlier, she'd barged into my bathroom again. "Hope you don't mind, I'm out of tampons," she'd called out with that practiced chirp, not waiting for a response. I didn't say anything. What could I say? I didn't want to start a fight over something so small. It wasn't small, though. It never had been. That morning, the discomfort had returned. Subtle but undeniable. I chalked it up to stress. The new shifts at the clinic were longer than expected. My body was tired, and maybe my mind was inventing symptoms to match. That's what I told myself, at least. I left the house just after 7. The bus was late, so I walked the last 4 blocks to work. It was already too warm for a jacket, but I kept mine zipped. The walk helped me feel grounded, normal. By the time I reached the clinic, the ache had grown sharp, and I had to stop in the hallway just outside the break room. I pressed one hand to the wall, the other to my lower abdomen. "Hey, you good?" It was Jamal, one of the older nurses. I nodded, gave a tight smile. "Didn't sleep well." He raised an eyebrow, unconvinced, but didn't push. Later that morning, I excused myself between patient charts and made the appointment. The urgent care was only 3 blocks away. I walked over in my scrubs, checked in quietly, and waited with my hands folded in my lap, wrists tight against one another. I told the nurse practitioner what I could. She nodded politely, jotted notes. Then she took samples. 30 minutes passed. I tried not to think. I focused on the hum of the overhead light, on the smudge on the linoleum, on anything but what I feared. She came back with the results. Her tone didn't change, but her eyes, they softened. "You tested positive for gonorrhea." I blinked. Then again. I haven't been with anyone," I whispered, not trusting my voice. "For over a year." She gave a tight-lipped smile. "Sometimes infections can go unnoticed for a while, but it's best to start treatment immediately. I'll write up the prescription." My heart didn't drop. It sank. Quietly, like a stone slipping beneath still water. I nodded, signed the form, and left without asking any more questions. Walking back to the clinic, I didn't feel real. I wasn't angry yet. I wasn't anything. Just a question trying to make sense of its own existence. Back at home, Valora wasn't filming. She was curled on the couch, watching her own videos on mute. "Hey," she said, "you look pale." I paused, watched her face, her brows raised, all concern and polish. She patted the seat next to her. "Want some tea?" That's when it hit me, the memory. Her hand reaching into my drawer, her offhand comment. "God, you're so paranoid about germs. It's not that deep." My stomach twisted. I couldn't say it. I wouldn't. Not yet. I shook my head. "No, just tired." She shrugged, turned her attention back to the screen. I walked past her, up to the room that didn't quite feel mine anymore. Later that night, as I lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling. My mind turned over every memory, every small invasion disguised as sisterhood. My chest ached, not from infection, but from betrayal I hadn't named yet. I didn't cry, not then. I held it all in my throat, like something too sacred to spit out. I didn't know what to do next, but I knew I couldn't pretend anymore. Valora's text came in just before noon. "Family dinner tonight, just us. Mom's making her casserole. Be there." No question mark, no explanation, just a performance set to begin, and I was being summoned as an extra. I didn't respond right away. I stared at my phone long enough for the screen to fade, then locked it. My shift at the clinic ended early, but I stayed an hour longer, cleaning exam tables that were already clean. It was better than going home, better than walking into that house with its curated chaos and Valora's scent lingering on everything I owned. Eventually, I changed clothes in the staff restroom and walked toward Merlene's place. The house stood just as it always had. White siding, cracked driveway, the porch light still flickering like a bad lie. But that evening, it felt smaller. Or maybe I had just grown out of it. Merlene greeted me at the door with a brittle smile. "You look tired," she said, brushing a strand of hair from my face like I was 6 years old again. I offered a soft, "Hey," and walked past her into the dining room. The table was set too formally for a weeknight. Cloth napkins, polished cutlery. The same chipped casserole dish she used on holidays rested in the center, steaming slightly. Valora sat at the head of the table, her phone flipped face down beside her plate. She looked up with a rehearsed brightness. "You made it. Good." I sat without comment. Harlan was already there, unfolding a paper napkin with methodical patience. He nodded to me but didn't smile. We began eating, quiet bites, forced pleasantries. Merlene asked about the clinic, then cut herself off mid-question. The air felt charged, like something unspoken had been stuffed into the corners of the room. And then Valora cleared her throat, loud, deliberate. "I wanted us to gather tonight because, well, there's been a situation." My fork hovered halfway to my mouth. I didn't breathe. "Thalassa has been dealing with something very serious," she continued, locking eyes with our parents. "A personal health matter that has implications." Merlene's jaw tightened. Harlan's hand stilled over his glass. Valora's tone softened, but the edge in her words remained sharp. "We're family, and it hurts me to see my sister struggle. But when your choices affect the people around you, we have to address it." I didn't look at her. I stared at the casserole, now cooling. "She tested positive for an STD, Valora said, her voice dipping into a theatrical whisper, like this was a confession meant to impress her audience. Merlene gasped. "What? Oh my God!" "It's embarrassing," Valora added, hand to her chest. "But I think it's time we help her be accountable. I mean, who knows where it came from?" That's when I looked up. Slowly. Valora leaned forward, all false sympathy. "You probably gave it to me." The room collapsed inward. My breath caught. My fingers curled into my lap. "You've been careless," she went on, voice lilting, leaving things around, sharing. "It's easy to forget what boundaries are when you live in someone else's space." Merlene looked at me with something worse than anger. Disappointment. Quiet, poisonous, permanent. I tried to speak. My mouth opened, but no sound came. I glanced at Harlan. He looked down at his plate, chewing slowly, like none of this was happening. I stood. The chair scraped loud against the tile. My hands trembled. My chest felt hollowed out, like I'd been scooped clean and left on display. "I don't have to sit here for this," I said, my voice too calm to be safe. Valora raised an eyebrow. "You sure? You've been hiding enough already." I walked out. Not because I was weak, but because if I stayed, I would have set the whole room on fire. Outside, the air hit my lungs hard. I kept walking until their voices faded, until the sidewalk stretched empty ahead of me. She may have spoken louder, but I was the one who remembered everything. I didn't go into work the next day. No one asked why, and I didn't volunteer an excuse. I just needed to sit in a space where no one was demanding an answer I wasn't ready to give. The house was quiet. Valora had left early for a brand shoot, or maybe a meeting with her brand strategist. Same difference. I sat at the edge of the bed for a long time, still in yesterday's jeans and a t-shirt that no longer smelled like me. My mouth was dry, my eyes ached, but they wouldn't cry. I hadn't slept much, only enough to count as unconscious. Her words kept playing on loop in my head. "You probably gave it to me." Not screamed, not spat, just said, like a casual afterthought, like telling someone they left the milk out. And Merlene. She hadn't even flinched. She had clutched her pearls with practiced drama, but when it came time to question the daughter she dressed for church, her silence was louder than any accusation. I stood up and walked to the hall closet, pulling out an old storage bin I hadn't touched since I moved in. I carried it to my room, placed it on the bed, and peeled back the lid. The smell of old paper and laundry detergent wafted up. A quiet, stale nostalgia. Inside were fragments of my college years, faded notes, birthday cards from classmates, ticket stubs. At the bottom was a shoebox, still taped shut. I tore it open and sorted through yellowed envelopes and folded up post-its. And there it was. Something I hadn't thought of in years. Valora had faked having mono once. I was in my sophomore year, and she was finishing up a marketing course she hated. One night, I'd passed the study room and caught her printing something on our old desktop printer. "What are you doing?" I'd asked, already half knowing. She laughed. "Doctor's note," she said, waving it around like a flag. "Gotta skip the midterm." I remembered staring at the screen, our family address typed in the header, the signature squiggled and scanned from a receipt she found online. I hadn't said anything back then. I'd convinced myself it was harmless, victimless. I shouldn't have. Back in the present, I flipped through more papers, more receipts Valora had borrowed for freelance gigs that never happened. There was a pattern. She'd always found ways to rewrite reality when it didn't suit her, to erase the messy truths and paint over them with words that looked better on camera. I opened my laptop, scrolled through an old email archive. In a folder labeled dorm stuff, I found a message from her to a mutual friend. "People are so gullible," she wrote. "All you need is a confident tone, and they'll believe whatever story you sell them." It wasn't the worst thing she'd ever said, but it crystallized something. This wasn't new. This wasn't just about the infection. This was about a lifetime of manipulation that I had tolerated under the label of keeping peace. But peace had never existed, just a carefully controlled narrative, with Valora at the center and me at the margins, written in pencil so she could erase me when needed. I set the laptop down, heart pounding, not with fear, but with clarity. They'd always looked at me like I was overreacting, sensitive, quiet, easy to override, but I remembered every inconsistency, every time I was told I misunderstood what I'd clearly seen, every moment I was gaslit into doubting my own memory. This time, I didn't need anyone else to believe me. I believed myself. That was enough. I slid the box back under the bed, but left the lid cracked open. I wasn't done with it yet. I was done playing the silent role in someone else's script. 2 days passed before the next dinner invite came through. This time, it was a group text. Valora wrote, "Let's have a real talk. Just family. Mom's making brisket." There was no mention of what happened last time. No acknowledgement of the silence that had swallowed the room whole. But I knew this wasn't about reconciliation. This was stage 2 of a performance she'd already outlined in her head. I agreed to come, but I came differently. No makeup, no earrings. I wore a plain black blouse and jeans, not because I didn't care, but because I didn't want to play her part anymore. No curated expressions, no placating silence. Merlene greeted me at the door like nothing had happened. "There's my girl," she said with a little squeeze of my arm. I gave her a half smile, not because I wanted to, but because I still hadn't figured out how to unlearn being polite to someone who'd never defended me. Valora was already seated at the table, her napkin folded perfectly in her lap. She looked radiant, of course, hair set, lashes curled, lips tinted just enough to look natural. Harlan sat next to her, reading the sports page on his phone like he wasn't in the same zip code. Dinner started quiet, a few clinks of cutlery. Merlene talked about church. Harlan nodded. I chewed slowly, mostly bread. Then Valora cleared her throat, and the room shifted. "I know things have felt tense," she began, eyes locked on our mother. "And I just want to say, it's been a really difficult time for me too." I didn't move, Valora continued. "Dealing with someone you love going through something health-related, is never easy, especially when it could affect the people around them." Merlene looked at her, then at me, as if waiting for me to nod or cry or explain something I didn't do. "I think we all need to be more supportive," Valora added. "Even if someone we love made a mistake, we're all human." I placed my fork down slowly. "I haven't made any mistakes," I said calmly. "Not the kind you're implying." Valora's tone sharpened. "Then who gave it to you, Thalassa? You were careless. You don't live alone. It's not like I could have given it to myself." Her smile was saccharine, but her eyes were daring me to crack. I looked at her. "Or maybe you did." Silence snapped through the room like a wire pulled too tight. Merlene's face froze. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Her eyes narrowed not at Valora, but at me. Harlan didn't lift his head. He just stopped scrolling and sipped his tea. The air thickened. My heart wasn't racing, it was pacing, steady, waiting for her next move. Valora blinked, caught off guard for once. "Excuse me?" I kept my voice low. "You wanted to talk, so let's talk. You used my things without asking. You dismissed my boundaries like they were optional. And now you want to rewrite the story so that I'm the one who brought this into your life?" Merlene interjected. "Girls, please, this isn't the time." "No, Mom," I said, turning to her. "This is exactly the time." Valora scoffed. "You sound paranoid." I stood, slow and deliberate. "If you want to go there, we will, but you won't like how it ends." I left my plate untouched, my chair askew. I didn't slam the door. I didn't raise my voice, but I felt the shift, the tectonic snap of something old finally splitting wide open. Outside, the wind was cooler than I remembered. The sun had dipped just low enough to cast long shadows across the driveway. I got in my car, stared at my hands on the steering wheel. I had made my first move. What came next would decide who lost everything. I didn't speak to anyone the day after the dinner. I didn't go into work. I didn't scroll, didn't text. I just sat at the small desk in my room, rereading the printout from urgent care. Diagnosis, date, treatment. Nothing changed. The words were still there, cold and clinical. They didn't lie, but someone else had. The house was quiet. Valora was gone, out filming or hosting another sponsored brunch. The absence of her footsteps was a relief I hadn't realized I needed. I leaned back, exhaled, and opened my laptop. If this was going to be a war of perception, I wasn't fighting with tears. I'd fight with timestamps. I opened my calendar, checked text logs, tracked every shift I'd worked over the last 2 months. Then I pulled out receipts from the drawer, things I'd saved without meaning to. A Target pharmacy bag, a receipt for tampons I never used. I lined them up in a folder, like evidence on a courtroom bench. Next, I slid open the drawer beneath my vanity where she kept her overflow cosmetics, stuff she didn't want to clutter her own room with. I stared at her imported toner bottles, the pricey serum she claimed I was too basic to appreciate, and the little jar she always dipped into after I cleaned the bathroom. That's where I placed the recording device, deep enough not to be noticed, angled just enough to catch her voice. I wasn't hoping for a confession, just confirmation. That night back in my room, I laid flat on the bed and listened. "She's such a wreck right now," Valora's voice said, crystal clear. "Still thinks this just happened. God, if she only knew. Whatever. She'll figure it out. Maybe." I didn't flinch. I just saved the file. Later, as I collected my folder of documents and zipped it shut, Merlene knocked once and stepped inside before I answered. Her eyes went to the box in my hands. "What's all this? Are you really still trying to ruin your sister's life?" I blinked, holding her gaze. "I'm trying to recover mine." Her jaw tightened. She looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language she refused to learn. "You've always been the quiet one," she muttered. "That was your place." I didn't reply. I let the words sit where they landed, ugly, bitter, real. She walked out before I could respond, or maybe because she didn't want to hear what I had to say next. By the time I stepped outside, the sun had dipped low behind the neighbor's fence. The air smelled of cut grass and someone's backyard grill. I loaded the folder into the passenger seat of my car and sat behind the wheel, letting the silence settle again. "They may own the dinner table," I whispered, "but I own the record." I sent the audio file and my notes to a cloud folder, encrypted the link, and forwarded it to Alyssa, my friend from nursing school, now working for a local legal clinic. Just the subject line, documentation, hold for safekeeping. I didn't ask her to act on it, not yet, but I needed someone else to know. Someone outside this house, this family. That night, I slept for the first time in days. Not deeply, but without fear of what I might wake up to. I gave them one last chance to tell the truth. They chose silence. I chose proof. The hallway felt colder than usual, though the thermostat hadn't changed. Maybe it was the silence that crept into the corners, the kind of quiet that followed a storm but promised another. I came home early from the library that day, just after noon, hoping to grab a few files I'd forgotten. I hadn't planned on staying long. At the top of the stairs, something stopped me. My bedroom door was shut and locked. There was a note taped to it in Valora's handwriting. "Moved your stuff out to make space for guests. Consider it a favor." I stood there for a few seconds, staring at the door, then turned. My boxes, some open, some sloppily sealed, were stacked by the linen closet like discarded packages. Clothes, folders, even a picture of Dad and me from my graduation sat half-bent on top. Valora's voice floated from behind the door. "You clearly need space. I'm just giving it to you." I didn't respond. I didn't knock. I picked up the picture, straightened it gently, and set it aside. I gathered my things, one box at a time, and carried them downstairs to the living room. When I turned around, Valora was leaning against the banister, arms crossed, face blank. "You really going to play victim until the lights go out?" she asked. "What's this? A lead up to a sympathy post? Something for your pity followers?" I placed the box on the couch. "You started the fire. I'm just showing the smoke." Her smile vanished. "You think you're some kind of hero now? You think people are going to care?" I didn't blink. I don't need them to care. I need the truth to exist somewhere other than in your mouth. Valora pushed past me, knocking into my shoulder, and stormed toward the kitchen. Something heavy hit the floor, probably the water bottle she'd been carrying. A second later, glass shattered. "You're pathetic," she snapped. "Everything you've got is borrowed. Your life, your job, your voice." "And yet," I said softly, "you're the one who stole my name to make a claim." She froze. Her hands clenched. I turned and walked toward the hallway cabinet where she kept loose paperwork and unused decor. I had a feeling, and I was right. There, tucked behind a stack of expired warranties, was a copy of my old insurance paperwork, my full name, my policy number, the clinic's name, and Valora's writing on a sticky note attached. "Need this for doc visit. Don't forget to shred." The rage came quick, hot, but it didn't boil over. It cooled into something sharper. I brought the paper to the table and photographed it with my phone. Then I scanned it into the secure folder I'd shared with Alyssa. "This is what you're willing to do to keep control," I muttered, barely above a whisper. "Fraud under my name, all to protect an image that's already cracked." I didn't pack the rest of my things. I left them. What mattered now couldn't be stuffed in boxes. Instead, I drove to the clinic I'd worked at for 2 years, before Valora talked me into pursuing something lighter. I walked through the front door, nodded to the receptionist, and asked if Director Suarez had a moment. 10 minutes later, I sat across from her in a small office that smelled of coffee and hand sanitizer. I laid out the situation clearly, showed her the scanned document and timeline. She listened. She didn't interrupt. "We'll provide notarized records," she said calmly. "If you need more formal statements, we can do that too." "Thank you," I said, standing. "I'm not looking to destroy anyone. I just need the truth to have teeth." Later that evening, I returned home long enough to pick up my phone charger and one set of scrubs. Valora was out. The house smelled of burnt toast and tension. I left the key on the counter, locked the door behind me, and drove back to Alyssa's place. Her guest room was small, the bed stiff, but I hadn't felt safer in weeks. Before I went to sleep, I opened my journal and wrote one line. "You wanted silence. I gave you storms instead." When you kick someone out, you forget they might walk back in with the truth in their hands. Saturday afternoon felt strangely still. I sat cross-legged on the bed in Alyssa's guest room, blinds half closed, laptop perched on a pillow. A muted breeze moved through the open window, but I didn't feel it. All my attention was fixed on the glowing screen. Valora was live. Her signature intro music played, soft piano under her usual sing-song voice. "Hi, loves. It's been a heavy couple of weeks, I know, and I've missed you all so much." The chat exploded with hearts and emojis. She pressed her palms together. "I've had a lot on my heart lately, especially when betrayal comes from within your own home." She sniffed theatrically, dabbing her eyes even though no tears had fallen. Family dynamics are complicated, right? You try to protect someone and suddenly, you're the villain. My stomach didn't turn. I wasn't angry. I'd already gone past that. I watched her. Studied the rise of her chest, the carefully chosen silk robe, the string of pearls. Not heirloom, not earned, just polished facade. Then it happened. The screen on my phone lit up with a separate notification. It was a screen recording from a private group chat. Valora's voice, sharp, unguarded, spilled through the room. That dumb girl's been using my stuff since forever. She's so paranoid now. Guess it finally caught up to her. I mean, she practically lives off me, but still thinks she owns boundaries. The clip was short, brutal, real. Seconds later, it was everywhere. People in her live chat started typing. Wait, what did you say about your sister? Did you really call her dumb? Are you the reason she got sick? Valora froze mid-sentence, her eyes flicking off camera. For once, her smile didn't know what to do. She blinked fast, then tried to laugh it off. Oh wow, you guys are fast, she said, voice faltering. That clip is completely out of context. That was a private venting moment. But no one was buying it. A second clip surfaced, this time of Merlene. Footage from a family dinner someone had secretly recorded. Merlene handing over a velvet box. You've earned this, she'd said to Valora, placing the heirloom necklace into her palm. Don't tell your sister yet. Now that too was public, and it was spreading like wildfire. The chat exploded again. You stole from your own sister? This isn't protecting, this is manipulation. Where's Thalassa? She deserves better. Valora's face had drained of all color. She fumbled with her mouse, then abruptly ended the stream. The screen went black. I sat back, breathing steady. My phone buzzed. Merlene. I didn't pick up. It buzzed again. Valora. I ignored that, too. Another notification popped up. #Justice for Thalassa was trending. I wasn't gloating. I didn't smile. I didn't forward it to Alyssa. I just stood, walked outside, and let the sunlight settle on my face. There was no parade, no victory lap, just clarity. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's a whisper repeated 1,000 times until the world has no choice but to listen. The world had finally seen her mask crack. But I wasn't done yet. Morning came heavy. The sun didn't fight to be seen, and I didn't bother to open the blinds. Harlan's house was still. I heard the creak of the floorboards when he moved through the kitchen, the steady rhythm of a kettle heating water. My phone buzzed twice before I picked it up. The first message was from Valora. Let's talk. We're still sisters. The second was a voicemail from Merlene. I didn't listen. I didn't need to. I could already imagine her voice, saccharine and shallow. We need to show unity. Let's not let outsiders pull us apart. I deleted them both. That same afternoon, I walked into my clinic's administrative office. Suarez met me with her usual gentle firmness. I handed her the manila folder, copies of my insurance records, printouts from Valora's medical filings, statements that didn't match my history. I need this documented, I told her, officially. Suarez didn't ask unnecessary questions. She flipped through the pages, nodding as she took in the timestamps and signatures. We'll file it internally, she said, and provide copies for whatever next step you choose. I thanked her, but the word felt too small. This wasn't revenge. This was air after being underwater too long. I remembered Valora once sneering at me during a party years ago, whispering, "She'll never stand up to me." That voice echoed in my head as I stepped out into the gray light of day. But she was wrong. I wasn't standing up. I was stepping out. Later that evening, I returned to Harlan's for dinner. He had made soup, nothing fancy but warm. He didn't talk much, and I didn't force it. After the dishes were cleared, he brought out a small wooden box and set it on the table without a word. I knew what it was before I even opened it. The heirloom necklace. The one Merlene had given to Valora in secret. The one meant for me. It was always supposed to be yours, Harlan said quietly. I was wrong not to say it sooner. I didn't speak. My throat tightened, but no tears came. I nodded, taking the box with both hands. For the first time in years, I felt like someone had seen me, not as someone's daughter or sister, but as a person standing on her own. Afterward, I sat on the back porch with a cup of tea, the box resting beside me. The quiet hum of Sacramento evening rolled in. Distant traffic, a dog barking, wind rustling through eucalyptus trees. Then I pulled out my phone. No build-up, no speech. I typed the message and sent it. To Valora, I won't be your scapegoat anymore. I'm done carrying your shame. Then I opened my email. To the family group thread, I attached the audio recording, the insurance fraud timeline, and a short note. Since no one wanted to ask for the truth, I'll make it available. I didn't write it to destroy them. I wrote it so no one could rewrite it again. I closed the email, placed my phone face down, and breathed. The house may still be standing, but I no longer live inside it. 2 weeks later, the wind in the park didn't feel sharp anymore. It rustled the trees above me like a mother waking her children gently. I sat on a worn bench near the duck pond, notebook resting on my lap, pen balanced between my fingers. The city moved around me, kids chasing each other over sunlit grass, joggers with earbuds, parents pushing strollers. For once, I wasn't measuring distance by tension. I was just sitting still. I hadn't spoken to Valora since I hit send. No text, no apology, not a call, not a whisper. But she had disappeared from the public eye. Her socials were scrubbed. Last I heard, she left town. Maybe for damage control, maybe just to hide. Either way, she wasn't my problem anymore. And her silence, it used to sting. But now, it just floated like static. There, but meaningless. The insurance case was still open. My documentation was solid, and I'd given a full statement. I wasn't angry anymore, just tired of being asked to explain things that should have been obvious. Sometimes the truth doesn't scream. Sometimes it just waits to be seen. A familiar pair of footsteps approached behind me. Harlan. He didn't announce himself, didn't ask to sit. He just placed a brown paper grocery bag next to me on the bench. Apples, tea, peanut butter. Then he lowered himself down with a quiet grunt. We sat in silence for a while. It wasn't awkward. It was what peace sounded like when words weren't required. I didn't listen enough, he said finally, not looking at me. Not when it mattered. I nodded. But you're here now. He nodded too. That was it. That was all we needed. We watched a little girl toss crumbs to ducks that didn't want them. I thought about the last few years of my life. How I'd been so careful, so quiet, hoping silence would be enough to earn peace. But silence hadn't protected me. It had only made me easier to erase. The next day, I started volunteering at a shelter 3 blocks from my apartment. They needed someone to help organize meds, explain discharge instructions to women who had nowhere else to go. It wasn't flashy, but it was real. By the second week, I found myself sketching again. Nothing ambitious, just shapes, people in motion, lines that didn't have to be perfect. It reminded me of who I was before I shrank myself to fit inside someone else's frame. At night, I wrote in a new journal. I didn't write about Valora. I didn't write about Merlene. I wrote about the garden by my building. About a woman in her 70s who ran the shelter like a drill sergeant with a heart. About a boy who thanked me just for explaining a side effect no one else had mentioned. Forgiveness? It's not always about reconciliation. Sometimes it's just about release. I didn't need Valora to say sorry. I didn't need Merlene to rewrite the past. I needed to stop dragging their weight behind me like a chain I never chose. So I let go. Not for them, for me. And that's where I'll leave it. This was my story. What would you have done if it were yours? Sometimes the loudest strength is found in quiet decisions, like walking away, like speaking truth without screaming. I learned that you don't have to set yourself on fire just to keep others warm. The truth, even when uncomfortable, is never something to be ashamed of. And family? Family should never be a place where dignity goes to die. If you've ever felt erased, overlooked, or manipulated into silence, I want you to know, you are not alone and you are not powerless. Your voice has value even if it trembles. And healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means refusing to carry someone else's shame any further. Now I'd love to hear from you. What would you have done if you were in my place? Have you ever been blamed for something you didn't do, especially by someone you trusted? Let's talk about it in the comments. If this story touched your heart or made you think, comment 1 below, or tell me where you're watching from. And if it didn't speak to you, that's okay too. Let me know why. I read every word. If you want more stories like this, true, raw, and deeply human, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and follow the channel. Your support keeps these voices alive.